Welcome to JTV's very first Question Time live event. We're here at JFS, which is one of Europe's largest and oldest Jewish schools. We've got a superb panel of guests where we're going to be discussing some really interesting topical issues. We've got the sixth form JFS students here today, and I'm going to start by introducing the panel to all of the audience and for our viewers at home. We've got Simon Johnson, who's the Chief Executive of the Jewish Leadership Council, former Director of Corporate Affairs at the Football Association, and COO of the England 2018 bid. We've got Laura Marks, founder of Mitzvah Day and founder of the Jewish Muslim Women's Network. Rabbi Shlomo Farhi, who's the director of the Jewish Futures Trust and Chazak. Jo Greenaway, who is a senior lawyer specializing in international arbitration. She works at the London Beth Din, has a new role focusing on difficult divorce cases, and she's currently one of the first cohort of women training to be a Mayanot, which is a new leadership qualification for women created by the Chief Rabbi. And finally, we're joined by Eddie Aronson, who's a co-director of content at JTV and a philosophy graduate at Heathrow College and the London School of Economics. So let's give our panel a big round of applause. So, to our first question, Max Nathan, can you raise your hand? He's over here. So let's get a microphone to Max.
Do you feel that Israel education in Jewish schools is biased?
Is Israel education biased in Jewish schools? Laura Marks.
Well, as somebody who doesn't have my children in a Jewish school, whose children didn't go through a Jewish school system, I couldn't tell you actually what is taught in Jewish schools. And I want to take a slightly different angle on this one, which is that regardless of whatever is being taught in JFS or any other Jewish school, the question I want to ask is, where do children in Jewish schools learn about Israel? And where do children in non-Jewish schools learn about Israel? So we're in a situation in this country with about 60% of all Jewish children in Jewish schools. Now, if what they're telling them about Israel is biased, and I don't even know what biased means in this context, then certainly that's what the Jewish kids are hearing. And so my question to you really is much broader than that, which is, where are Jewish children learning about everything? And if they're learning about it in Jewish schools, how are they getting their information that the rest of the world's getting? So obviously, as Jewish kids, you don't only get your information from school. You watch TV, you have the internet, you have friends, you watch films, you have information from all sorts of different places. But an enormous amount of what you learn is in schools. And so, to be brief, I would ask whether Jewish children are getting the sorts of information that children in non-Jewish schools are getting, and whether the information that kids in Jewish schools are getting is very different from what the rest of the country is hearing. And that seems to be much more of an issue than whether or not what you're hearing is biased.
So, but do you feel specifically with regards to the case of Israel education, do you think that are you suggesting that somehow it's somewhat skewed, or there's only one narrative being told in Jewish schools that's not being told that's being taught in non-Jewish schools?
Well, I don't know about that, because first of all, I'm sure every Jewish school is different. I'm sure they have different angles on things. I don't know how much formal education there is about Israel. A lot of what you learn about Israel is when you go. So a lot of people in your year will be going off on tours to Israel. You went on tour last year, probably most of you, to Israel, or you went when you were in year 8 or 9. So I don't know that it's biased. I don't know what biased means.
Okay.
Biased means, I presume from your perspective, that you only hear an Israel right at all costs view. Well, I would like to believe that you're intelligent enough to hear lots of different perspectives on Israel, and that you've got open minds and you hear it from all sorts of sources.
Okay, so we've got a comment over here from someone. We're just going to wait for a microphone to get to you.
Surely by going on tour and going on sort of Levi or Atoy when you're in year 9, should you get subjected to solely a pro-Israel view? Do you not agree that it should be taught in Jewish school, as someone who's come from a non-Jewish school? Do you not think it should be taught in Jewish schools that there is a case for the other side, because then they would be growing up with only one-sided view?
Okay, Rabbi Farhi, do you want to respond to that point?
This is, I think, I don't know, is that working? Okay, yeah. It's an incredibly difficult question, I have to say. And let me put it out this way. You know, people are always talking about, are we telling our story or their story? And I think that's a mistake. There isn't our story or their story. There's just the story. The challenge is when you're getting battered in the media all the time, the challenge is to be able to understand the things that are not being put out all the time on media. And in many ways, I think sometimes Jewish youth groups or schools or whatever it is, they feel like they need to err on the side of caution and kind of give you loads of the Jewish narrative, if you will. Can I ask you this, just as an honest question between me and you? Like, I don't know if you're pro-Israel or pro-Palestinian or one state, two-state solutions, but do you feel that Palestinians have a rough time in Israel? Yes. Now, even that answer is in many ways skewed, because that would depend on which Palestinian, right? There are the loads that are having incredible rights and unbelievable opportunities that they would never have, even if the country was owned, run, managed by themselves. And the proof would be looking to the countries that are surrounding Israel, who don't have Israel's sovereignty imposed upon them, and they have less rights, and there's less, et cetera, et cetera. So you find the one guy living a dream life in Israel, and he goes online on Facebook, and he's like, yay, Israel, and I'm Muslim. And then you find this other person who's saying, what are you talking about? They just destroyed my house in a bomb because some guy was firing missiles. So the concept of being able to look at this narrative and see that there's one story or another story is in and of itself, I think, part of the problem. I think probably what needs to happen more often is exactly the opposite of what happens on social media. Today, there's this concept of a social media algorithm. And there was actually an experiment done a little while ago about someone who all they did was anytime something came up about terrorism, they clicked on this link about terrorism where it was kind of defending the side of the terrorist rather than all around the world. And what they started to notice is that the newsfeed was absolutely clogged with pro-ISIS, pro-Sharia law, pro-terrorism of any nature, Muslim or otherwise. And that algorithm, in so many ways, this concept of the isolation, of being with people who are like you, sharing only one vision or one version of the facts, is an incredibly important thing to take into account. Because if you only hear one thing, then that's all you're going to get. But to just understand the complexity of this thing and open yourself up wide enough to challenge people when you're being taught, I think is what needs to happen.
Okay, so I'd like to ask the audience, and then we'll go back to more members of the panel. Rabbi Fahy was saying that we've got to stop thinking about one side or the other side of the story, but think about the story itself and get the full picture. Raise your hand, and I want to just raise your hand if you have an opinion on this, whether you think we're given the full picture when it comes to Israel education. Anyone have any thoughts on this? Yeah, you in the corner.
In all honesty, when we were in younger years, I wouldn't say that we had a full idea of the story, as Rabbi Fahy said. I'd say that as we've grown up, maybe we've been given a little bit more information as to both sides, even though I know you like to say there's one side there. There is information that can support either side of the argument. And I think as also President of Israel Society, we've worked a lot.
Just drop that in there.
Yeah, we've worked a lot on actually getting all views in there, and I think that for the younger years at least, the whole idea of getting both sides of the story isn't actually what happens. I think maybe for us in this year it is, but I think when I was younger I wasn't lucky enough to actually experience that. So
okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so Simon Johnson, you're Chief Executive of the Jewish Leadership Council. Are we giving our Jewish students today the full picture when it comes to Israel and the Middle East?
I don't think the schools are doing enough. I think that my view is I don't think that the majority of students at Jewish schools come out equipped with what they need in order to form their own view. I think that what I'm talking about are the basics of Jewish history, Zionist history, and Israeli structure. I think it's not just my opinion. The former ambassador to the UK, Daniel Taub, also had the same view, that the basics of Zionist history, the key dates, the key moments, are not really formally taught, and people have to acquire them in other ways. And in my view, if you don't understand the basics, you don't understand the history, you don't understand and have the knowledge about how the state was founded, then it's going to be very difficult for you to do either of two things. One, form your own opinion from the multiple opinions that you'll be subjected to at school and university, and to debate your opinion with those who have a contrary view. I mean, I'll give you an example. This year, 2017, we're celebrating a number of key anniversaries in Zionist history. In June, we celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Six-Day War. In November, we celebrate the 100th anniversary of the Balfour Declaration, and also in November, the 70th anniversary of the UN Partition Plan. Now, those are key moments in any understanding of Israeli history, and modern the situation between the Israelis and the Palestinians. Those are going to be big campaigns within the Jewish community, and I have a general concern that I don't think enough people have enough information about this, and particularly for those of you who are in year 13, who are going to be going to university next year, and will be, and therefore in November will be facing well-organized groups of people arguing, let's say, for an apology for Britain signing the Balfour Declaration, or for Israel for 50 years of occupation from the Six-Day War. What information do you have to be able to debate with them, whether to agree with them, to take them forward? The Israel-Palestinian situation is nuanced, it's complex, but in my view there is not enough basic information about Zionist history and structure that's coming from the schools.
Okay, so I'd like to ask the audience again, who here feels that they've been given, they haven't been given sufficient knowledge to present an argument in support of Israel, and conversely, who would say that actually the problem is that we haven't been presented with the Palestinian narrative properly? Any thoughts on this? I'd like to go to a girl. Any girls that would like to make a comment? We've had several guys so far. Come on, there must be a girl that wants to make a comment.
Hi. I think personally I feel as though not enough information is given on either side, but how would you propose putting out information about a topic that's inherently heavily opinionated in a non-biased way?
Right. Well, Eddie, you're involved in media as working with us at JTV. What do you think about presenting the facts when it comes to the issue of Israel and the Palestinian conflict?
So I think the questioner was quite right, that it's very difficult to get across nuance, especially on social media, when people like headlines that just shout at you. So I think that's quite right. I would just say that coming from a non-Jewish school, I always felt that my friends from Jewish schools didn't appreciate how little of, let's say, the pro-Israel narrative gets out into the wider public. And so I think that a lot of my friends in Jewish schools, they didn't realize that what their educators were doing were really preparing them to be able to counterbalance and make more fair the narrative that gets out there into the wider public. Because at the moment, I think in the UK especially, and maybe in Europe in general, the narrative and the sympathies are mainly with the Palestinians, and there's little sympathy given to what Israelis have to go through. And so it might, for you might experience your education in Israel studies as being, one-sided, but it certainly could be the case, but I think a lot of it is your educators trying to address that balance and prepare you to be able to speak for the sort of the unspoken narrative in the wider culture today.
Okay, Joe Greenway, a final comment from you, and then we're going to move on to the next question.
Thank you.
You've got the microphone.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
So I'd just like to add something to what Simon was saying earlier, because I think that is not the full picture in terms of Israel education and having a rounded view. I think that what he said is key in that, yes, Israel literacy is so important and we're not getting enough, and it has to be complex Israel education so people are really, really armed with the facts. But the other side to that is that we need to be having encounters with people from across the spectrum and hearing their side, their story, their perspective. And to me, I'm privileged that I've had many opportunities. I've worked at the BBC and met Palestinians. I met Hanan Ashwari, who's a leader in Ramallah, and people across the Jewish spectrum, Israeli Arabs. And to me, those were the most formative experiences, because there's a real tendency, in my opinion, to demonize people who aren't necessarily on your own personal camp. And whether you agree with them or not, we have to hear it. So I just think to get a rounded Israel education, it needs both the facts and the experiences. And I heard that here you had the Qadi of Jerusalem coming to visit, who's the head of the Sharia Council, which to me really indicates that you are getting amazing experiences as part of your Israel education. So that was particularly impressive.
Okay, fantastic. So facts and experience. We'll leave it at that for that question.